The Backrooms. You broke the chain. Phenomenon number 30. Orbs. No one has made you believe what you believe. A mysterious death. Meg operative Jack Spearling had been reported missing for 3 consecutive shifts without communication. A search of his premises on level 11 led to the discovery of an "in the event of my disappearance" letter and maps and notes. His body was recovered from the basement level of an abandoned retail outlet. Our investigation is in progress. Spearling's last journal entry. Eureka! I heard them. On the last of my food and almond water rations, not to mention that I must report for duty tomorrow, I hit pay dirt today. The flash on my Sony Cybershot finally revealed orbs hiding in the liminal darkness. So much for dust particles being everywhere. I heard those goddamned voices a few seconds later. You broke the chain. It didn't sound like a multitude, maybe 30 or 40 people, male and female, young and old, speaking in perfect unison. Each voice was so clear and distinct. To be honest, it was like they were in the room with me. I personally confirmed these 2 reports in our files. Exhausted, catching a few ZZZs here before starting back. Jack Sperling loved the Backrooms. An undying curiosity constantly tackled mysteries beyond the Meg mainstream. His latest private project involved 2 reports of mysterious voices that accompanied orbs appearing in digital photographs. It is almost fitting that his demise has become a mystery in itself. The body in the sleeping bag showed no signs of violence or foul play. One would have thought that Jack Spearling was resting peacefully. It was during the autopsy, as simple as it was, that things got crazy. Death follows a course of events. Organs shut down at different rates. Ignoring the medical jargon, the autopsy suggested that every bit of the deceased failed instantly and simultaneously. Image caption. Last photo on Jack Spearling's camera. Size info 640 by 480, 61.4 kilobytes. Device info Sony Cybershot f2/8 1/80 per second flash. Meg archives. What are orbs in digital photos? Hazy round spots and semi-transparent circles, sometimes called orbs, can appear in digital photographs using flash across dark places on both the Earth and the backrooms. Photographers explain these things rationally. Some ghost hunters and paranormal investigators believe that at least a few orbs appearing in digital photographs are either spirits of the dead or anomalous forms of life. They speculate that, whatever these things are, close range flash photography in dark locations might trigger secondary energies in any orbs that are present, making them visible to the camera. It is believed that orbs prefer to haunt dark locations devoid of humans. Basements, abandoned buildings, cemeteries at night, and rural hollows and hills. Many possibilities exist. Questions remain. Image caption. Figure 2. Auto-enhanced version of previous photograph. Notice, quote-unquote, bright orb circled in blue. Meg archives. The rational view. Photographers refer to orbs in digital photography as, quote-unquote, backscatter. Using a flash in low light conditions can illuminate airborne reflective particles, such as dust and water vapor, close to the camera lens that are otherwise invisible. This is especially true with the design of modern compact digital cameras, which have a great depth of field and sensitivity to light sources. This explanation explains most orb photos. The metaphysical view. The major explorer group has dispatched Team Epiphany, note, see more at the end of article, also known as Psychic, AnneDunne, Scientist, Dr. JohnRhinehart.jpg, and Swords, AmyCochrane, to level 11 to investigate the circumstances surrounding the death of Jack Spearling. The following is a transcript from that inquiry. Transcript. Dune. You dancin'? Reinhardt. Trying to relocate the photograph using Spearling's camera. There, got it. This is about where he was standing when he snapped this picture. Now, compare these orbs with the ones in his original photo. They are fewer in number, and the bright one is to the right of both poles. You doing your psychic thing? Finding out what these entities are? Dune. Long pause. My intuition whispers that we are here to find out what they are not. We are the only living things in this room. Whatever these orbs are, life is not involved. Rhinehart, did you know that your eyes glowed in the dark? Footnote. AnneDunne experienced life-changing physical and psychical transformations following her participation in the quote-unquote Great Catastrophe of level 710. End footnote. Dune. Yes, Doctor, I certainly did. My eyes see a lot of things. Right now, I see zero energy from the orbs. Nothing electromagnetic, nothing psychic. These are neither static electricity, nor thought forms or mental projections of any kind. They are not plainly visible, even to me. Like you, I only see them in photographs. Reinhardt. Okay, if not living, not energy, not psychic, then what? Dune. It could be floating dust particles close to the camera lens, reflecting the flash. Reinhardt. You don't believe that. Dune. Belief is the enemy. I don't believe anything. Reinhardt. You're telling me that we are dealing with talking dust particles. We have 3 cases, including Spearlings, where unrelated witnesses heard discarnate voices uttering the same phrase, "You broke the chain." Are you saying that we should just ignore that? Dune. No, John. I am saying that what we are dealing with is an absence of everything. Orbs are simply not. This phenomenon is the true opposite of something. Reinhardt. A talking nothingness. Who broke what chain? Dune. This phrase is probably not a direct communication between the phenomenon and the witness. The phenomenon has no sentience. We are more than likely just eavesdropping in on a single moment in time in another universe. At present, any meaning behind the phrase is unknowable. Reinhardt. What killed Spearling? Dune. I can answer that. More things are becoming clear. These orbs are invisible pinholes in the fabric of space and time. If you find yourself too close to too many of them, especially those brighter ones, your life might get sucked right out of your body. Reinhardt. Like how people can get sucked out of an airplane at high altitude during depressurization? Dune. Unfortunately, yes. Reinhardt. How many is too many? Bright orbs. Knowing anything about any one thing can sometimes be very difficult. Science realizes this. Nowhere is this more true than within our backrooms, where rational explanations often, quote, fly out the window, end quote. We defer to psychic AnneDunne. The accuracy of her intuition has proven remarkable time and time again. She explains that, quote, if the pale round orbs represent invisible pinholes in our space-time continuum, then these bright orbs might be larger punctures and tears. You can identify bright orbs easily by their luminosity and irregular shape in photographs. End quote. Since we share this phenomenon with the front rooms, we wonder how many other universes are perforated in places. Image caption. Figure 3. Enlargement of the quote-unquote bright orb from enhanced photograph. Compare with typical orb hovering above. Meg Archives. Estimate of the situation. The situation is uncertain because so much depends on knowing how and why Jack Spearling died. If he perished in the manner suggested by AnneDunne, i.e., his life was forcibly removed from his body due to its close proximity to several orbs of the anomalous variety, then we will suffer yet another challenge to our longevity. Although we can say with absolute certainty that most photographic orbs have rational and harmless origins, potential dangers from these anomalous types are cause for concern. Orbs are normally invisible. The Meg will post warnings in appropriate areas when possible. Do's and don'ts. Do. If you see orbs in your photographs, immediately leave that area. Take a photo in your new location to see if you are safe. Don't. Search for orbs. Attempt to quote unquote communicate with the orbs. Link to related tale. Anne's Lament. 1 of 3. The Backrooms. Welcome to your new home. Image caption. AmyCochrane. Meg Archives. Previously, a mysterious visitor delivered a front room's newspaper to Meg Team Harbinger on level 710. Security technician Alberto Sanchez, involved in the encounter, immediately suffered a psychotic break. Meg Station Chief Marvin Matthews believed that an extra dimensional, quote unquote, man in black, or MIB, was responsible for the mental breakdown or, quote unquote, enchantment, and ordered security technician AmyCochrane to escort Sanchez to Base Alpha for treatment. Like learning to open your eyes underwater, AmyCochrane mastered consciousness and sight during no clipping. The world turned translucent, almost transparent, and shot out like a roller coaster in every possible direction, while you felt that you were actually moving in slow motion. What a rush! No clipping with an unconscious person on a makeshift stretcher was a daunting task. Cochrane and her 2 assistants followed the pilgrim's path to level 1. Security and medical personnel waited patiently for them there. One of the pilgrims to the Harbinger Ark traveled with a Saberzoa from the Blue Channel and its spirit link. He was kind enough to let his Saberzoa deliver a message to us from Marvin Matthews. The Base Alpha official explained to security technician Cochrane. We will escort you to your briefing at this time. 2 medical techs carefully transferred Alberto Sanchez to the rickshaw ambulance and began immediately checking his vital signs. The patient was unresponsive, as the doctor intervened with stethoscope and experience, and checked the pupils and rates of respiration and pulse. After a few moments, the doctor turned and said, "We are sorry for your loss." He pulled the blanket over the man's face. "Your assistants will follow us to the morgue for now." He was just confused. Amy mumbled the words with barely any air behind them. Image caption. Anonymous painting of AnneDunne. Meg Archives. Like the rest of this sprawling concrete warehouse known as Level 1, Conference Room C, although the smallest one available, could easily accommodate more than 100 people. AmyCochrane paced this large room in Base Alpha with shuffling steps, drooped shoulders, and her gray eyes glued to the cement floor. She couldn't believe that Alberto was gone. He was her first real friend here in the back rooms. She would all but disappear whenever she stepped into the shadows. Clad in black, Amy was stealth incarnate. Twin short swords sheathed on her hips showed the world that this young girl meant business. Alberto called her Hermosa Muerte, or Beautiful Death. She was fearless when it came time to protect wanderers. The silver-haired man at the conference table let her walk away her grief. He looked more like an elementary school principal than a high-ranking Meg official, as he attacked a pile of paperwork with pencil in one hand and an eraser in the other. The door opened. "Ah," the senior officer broke the awkward silence and rose to his feet. "The heroine of level 365 graces us with her lovely presence." The heroine of level 365 was a 5'2", 30-something explosion of color. Fiery curls sat atop emerald eyes and painted lips. Her floral halter dress was way too festive for this somber occasion. A brass key on the chain around her neck caught flickers of light now and then. AnneDunne was the antonym of stealth. She greeted the official and apologized for her tardiness. Amy held out her hand, and Anne took it in both of hers. "It is too soon now," Anne said, "but we will become good friends." "I do not believe that to be possible," the official corrected. He placed a red binder on the table in front of the pair. The cover read, "Protocol of Non-Intervention and Non-Interference Regarding MIB Activity." Marvin Matthews wrote the book on MIB. Literally, "The document will not leave this room, and you are not to reveal its contents. I will ask you both to read it. Here's the Cliff Notes version. The men in black have visited the backrooms 4 times in recent history. The first time that the Meg tried to protect an individual marked for death by the MIB, we lost 10 of our best people. Humans can't hurt them. Humans can't stop them. The second time, we lost 49. We no longer interfere. Amy couldn't believe her ears. This is not different than swallowing a poison with no antidote or suffering a terminal illness. Nothing can save AnneDunne now. If we assigned 100 men to her, she would still end up dead, and we would lose 100 men. Matthews was not giving us a call to arms. He was reminding us to stand down. The Meg official gathered up his papers. The overseers are now aware of this situation. I leave you two to your own devices. One request? Anne asked. What is it? If the design is simple and material is readily available, might your supply officer have a weapon fabricated for me? The Meg official smiled grimly and penciled and signed the order. He handed her the page. Thank you. He shook her hand. AnneDunne, it has been an honor to finally meet you, he said. Image caption: The Unicorn. Meg Archives. You would think that a psychic could read a map and find her way around, AnneDunne said aloud to herself, then chuckled under her breath, crushing all negative thoughts, finding humor, even under these circumstances. It was her metaphysical armor. She paused for a moment of positive affirmation. The building that she was looking at was right in front of her all this time. Dune made her way to the clearly marked door and began the process of filtering herself through security. 4 checkpoints and 2 conversations later, she found herself on the other side of a counter from the quote-unquote giant in charge. He looked 8 foot tall, with shoulders 8 feet wide, and had his back to her. He turned around and flashed her the kindest smile that she ever saw. He was over 6 foot tall and full of muscle. May I please help you? His voice was soft and refined. I am leaving tomorrow morning and need to have a metal weapon fabricated. Each square equals 1/4 of an inch. She placed the sketch and document signed by the official on the counter. The unicorn? The giant asked. When you hold it in your clenched fist, it looks sort of like a unicorn. The giant sighed and studied the design of the weapon, and immediately recognized the signature on the document. Tomorrow? What type of metal? Iron. I need this weapon cut from the oldest cast iron you can find in the back rooms. Maybe an antique frying pan. Cast iron is too soft for knives, the giant explained. It is too brittle and won't hold an edge. That's okay. For my purposes, it must be cast iron. It only needs to possess the appearance of an edge. The giant sighed again. Hmm. Now, Tom, over at Tom's Diner, he has a frying pan that he claims was cast when dinosaurs ruled the back rooms. This is his prized possession. I happen to remember, when he told me for the umpteenth time, that the pan was cast in the front rooms in the year 18 something by Grimswold Manufacturing. Will he part with it? The giant sighed a third time. I will do everything that I can and see you first thing tomorrow morning with whatever I can pull together. I promise. You once saved my little brother from the sightless seers. Destiny was a funny thing. Only one bed, Anne noted, running her hand across the bedding. It's clean and dry, at least. They must have just changed it. She rummaged through her pack and changed into a nightshirt. Amy checked out the pillows. No mints on the pillows. The Meg security tech frowned. You'd think that they could have sprung for some candy for the heroine of level 365. The comment stung a bit, but Anne let it pass. Amy wondered about the brass key on a chain around Anne's neck. What's with the key? She asked. It goes to the front door of my house. Your house in the front rooms? Yeah. Hope was always a good thing. This was all chit-chat. Anne felt the tension building in the room. Ask your question, Amy. Are you really psychic? 7, Anne replied, then added, might just have been a lucky guess. Amy thought to herself that if Anne was really psychic, she would pick up on the number 7 that she mentally visualized, but it might have been just a lucky guess. I ask that the white light fill and surround us, cleansing our minds, bodies, and spirits, protect us from all negativity, lower vibrational energy or entities. I ask this, according to divine will, for the highest and greatest good. And so it is. Anne called forth the divine light of protection. I don't see your white light, Amy admitted. Don't be afraid, Anne whispered. I am going to open your third eye for a few seconds. She gently rubbed the girl's forehead and then tapped it with her painted fingertips. The security tech squealed in ecstasy. She glanced at her hands, and her wide eyes darted wildly around the Meg VIP suite. You could tell when the magic faded by the sadness and disappointment on that face. Everything will be fine, Hermosa Mruete, Anne reassured her. By the time that Amy recovered from shock, Anne was already brushing red locks with an unremarkable hairbrush trimmed in brass. I have met you in my dreams, AmyCochrane. Anne loaned her the brush and explained that their lives depended on holding on to this object for a short while. There is a nondescript table mirror that goes with the brass hairbrush. They are a featureless set, but the mirror no-clips you to level 365 when you look into it. That mirror is here at Meg Base Alpha. If you are interested, tell them I sent you. They both laughed harder than the joke was funny. It was a nervous reaction to the tragedy of their circumstances. I apologize for the heroine dig. Forget it. Let's try to sleep. Tomorrow will be a busy day. To be continued. Link to the following tale, Anne's Escape, 2 of 3, The Backrooms. Welcome to your new home. Image caption, Man in Black, Original State, Meg Archives. Being marked for death makes you a light sleeper. Guarding someone marked for death means no sleep at all. AmyCochrane, Meg Team Harbinger. When AmyCochrane made a silent shush gesture with her index finger placed vertically in front of her lips, AnneDunne stopped fiddling with the small pan of water on their portable cook stove. It was too early for polite company this morning. Nobody here slept last night. The approaching footsteps on the concrete floor of level 1 stopped several feet away from the locked door to their Meg VIP sleeping quarters. Careful listening hinted that the intruder was removing heavy boots. Amy assumed a combat stance, with short swords at the ready. Light knocking startled them both. What do you want? Amy growled. I am delivering your unicorn, as promised, came a refined, male whisper from the other side of the steel door. You ordered a unicorn? Amy asked Anne. I did, Anne answered. She unlocked the door and invited their guest inside. Amy was taken aback by the size of the fellow carrying his boots. I am Gunther, he told Amy. It is very early in the morning. He bowed to them both and handed Anne a flat sculpture of thick, black metal that measured about 4 by 4 inches. This was cut from Tom's oldest skillet, he said with pride. I hope it is to your liking. Anne slipped the sculpture between her middle and ring finger and made a fist. The points of the quote-unquote iron knuckles looked like unicorn ears and horn with a little imagination. She gave the giant a kiss on the cheek and thanked him. Gunther blushed, nodded, and left. Amy reached over and ran her hand along the unicorn. 2-inch blade. Extremely dull. I'm so very impressed. Maybe you can poke him in the eye with the pointy tip of the horn. Anne ignored the sarcasm and removed the small pan of boiling water. She poured herself a cup into a metal mug and added 2 pinches of white powder from an apothecary jar and stirred the mixture. Amy looked puzzled and curious. It's CRT, Anne explained. CRT? Amy asked. What's CRT? No. Anne stifled a laugh and smiled and said, Seer-tea is an elixir created by pulverizing dead sightless seers and dissolving the powder in a cup of boiling water. Crushed dead seers? Amy made a face. What are the benefits? This medicinal tea enhances mental focus and intuition, luck, and psychic abilities. Can I try it? Anne asked. What does it taste like? Is it bitter? Anne poured a taste into a second metal mug. Let it cool, she added, passing the sample. When you spit it out, please spit it back into the cup. Spit it out? Amy wondered. She filled her mouth. Her eyes went wild, and she spit the tea back into the cup and screamed. She plunged her finger into the mug and stirred the contents. Where did they go? It's called the living mouthful, Anne said. It felt like my mouth was full of living night crawlers and squirming minnows. Amy shivered and shuddered. I still feel them. This is how it feels the whole way down when you swallow. Anne added cold water to her tea and emptied the mug in a single go. She caught her breath and grinned. Meg Object of Interest, Level 365 Survival Kit. Meg recruits J.J. Jordan and Chris McKenna independently no-clipped into level 365 while examining the same table mirror framed in heavy brass. This antique mirror was one of the items held in an unmarked satchel wood chest hidden on level 1. Also found inside this wooden box, a matching brass hairbrush, mortar and pestle, glass apothecary jar, carved micro spoon, and a parchment scroll of pictorial instructions without text. The jar contained a white powder, later identified as the crushed remains of sightless seers. The quote-unquote sandalwood relic was crafted so that the contents of each compartment was secured from damage. This was a toolkit created by persons unknown to visit and survive level 365 and gather dead sightless seers. The route to the Pilgrim's Path from Base Alpha on level 1 was easy. Up the first staircase, down the long hallway, left past the elevator, and a right turn into the dead-end corridor. Where was everybody? This section should be bustling with Meg personnel. They were, technically, still in Base Alpha. Amy saw him first. The man in black stood tall and stretched thin, like an anorexic cadaver dressed for his funeral. The malignant tumor on this space-time continuum blocked the only local route to the Pilgrim's Path. Nobody can foretell their reaction to facing death. AnneDunne, Meg Team Looking Glass. Amy grabbed Anne's hand, and the pair made for the north exit from Base Alpha. She was looking for holes in a certain wall there. They found the right hallway, and both poked their heads inside one hole after another. The duo hit pay dirt and entered level 19. They dodged their way through a bewildering maze of randomly shaped attic spaces and the damp confusion of stacked boxes, furniture, and memories long forgotten. The enticing fireplace-like orange glow flickered through the floorboards, attempting to instill a sense of comfort and tranquility. Amy had no intention of staying on this level for long enough to suffer the nausea, dizziness, or hallucinations experienced by other wanderers. The MIB stayed hot on their heels, a tight squeeze, like some claustrophobic version of Twister, opened up into a large empty area. Amy let fly with some heat of her own. The salvo of fire salt crystals erupted into sparks upon impact. That one was for Alberto. This one's for me! Amy added insult to injury and hurled a second volley of firegrams and guaranteed the immolation. The MIB did everything a creature of flame should do. Flesh blistered and blackened, hideous screams sang solo to a macabre dance as it staggered and clothing burned. Then he laughed. The man in black taunted and promised to cuddle them in a hellish embrace. He drew closer, wrapped in flames. They ran for their lives. their pursuer extinguishing himself somewhere along the way. Finally exhausted, the pursued fell to their hands and knees and struggled for every breath. The MIB caught up with them and picked a nearby spot to relax. He wasn't even breathing hard. In fact, he wasn't even breathing. It was unnerving to watch him reconstitute his flesh and face and clothes. He stood up, tipped his fedora, and said, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." Those yellow eyes flashed at Amy, and he told Anne, "Abandon your friend. She will be unalive quite soon." Anne's second sight had enabled her to see the twin beams of psychic energy, as thin as pencil leads, shoot from his eyes and strike Amy's face. He smiled and vanished in plain sight. Amy jumped to her feet and bared both blades. The sparkle and life left her eyes as the enchantment took hold. "Mama!" she called out. "I can't see the man. He's here, but I can't see him. Mama, help me!" There were no words to describe that soul-wrenching scream that followed. Anne said softly, "You have tangles. Let me get the hairbrush from your pack and brush your pretty hair." "Tangles?" Amy whispered. Anne retrieved the brush and showed it to the girl. "Tangles? Tangles? I have tangles!" Amy babbled, her eyes unlocked from this place. "I hate tangles, Mama." "You certainly do have tangles," and worked around those swords, at the ready, and calmly stroked and gently brushed Amy's hair. The girl's body stiffled, like the torsion spring of a mousetrap. Even though one wrong move could trigger an unconscious and lethal attack, the psychic continued with this meticulous chore, working from the ends of the hair up to the roots. "I have tangles? Like Alberto?" Amy asked. "Exactly like Alberto," and answered in a quiet voice. "Your tangles are on the inside." "Will I die?" Amy interrupted. "Like Alberto?" "No, you only have 2 tangles left. They are stubborn, but I will have them undone in a few moments." The warrior sheathed her weapons, relaxed her shoulders, and reacted like a kitten being scratched behind its ears. You could almost hear her purring. Amy was back in the game. "Let me test my memory by telling you something." She took Anne's hand and said, "Let's walk as we talk. The entrance to level 20 is not far from here." Anne needed this respite and nodded. Amy began. "I no-clipped into the back rooms on my 18th birthday. It was Thursday, July 7th, 1977. Anne did some math in her head and said, "You look fabulous for being old enough to collect Social Security." Amy smiled politely, and her eyes got a little wet. "My parents hooked up one of those slip-and-slide water slide toys to the garden hose in our backyard to occupy the kids. The yard sloped downhill just a bit, and the kids were having a terrific time zipping along and getting soaked. It all looked like so much fun. Everybody else was inside, finishing up the cake and ice cream. I had a little breather before it was time to open my presents, so I said to myself, why not? I did a running belly flop onto that slippery ramp, and will never forget racing along on wet yellow plastic and ending up on wet carpet. Alberto was the first one to find and rescue me." Amy stopped and pointed to a pair of matching gilded bird cages on floor stands. She squeezed between the cages and disappeared behind a tower of stacked boxes. "Over here," she called. Hidden behind the boxes was the rusted door that led to level 20. I trained on these levels. Image caption: Meg dog tags for AnneDunne and AmyCochrane. Meg archives. What happened to our man in black? Amy wondered aloud. Her eyes peered into rooms filled with abandoned machinery and scanned corridors crowded with stacked wooden pallets of products that were mostly shrink wrapped. A tacky, oil like liquid dripped from the cracks in the roof and gathered here and there in pools on the floor. The warehouse, known as Level 20, was a huge and magnificent mess. "My guess is that he is recharging his batteries after facing Hermosa Muruete," Anne chuckled. "You reduced him to his original state, all by yourself." "This is the second time you called me Hermosa Muruete," Amy said. It's spooky. I know. Alberto used to call you that. You think it fits you? How does that hairbrush work? Amy changed the subject. The sightless seers on level 365 use metaphysical weapons to accelerate the process of poisoning the mental, physical, and emotional well being of their victims, Anne explained. This hairbrush was specifically created to remove all forms of negative and psychic attack in order for the user to safely negotiate the level. Enchantment is just another form of powerful psychic attack. Used promptly and correctly, the hairbrush removes these tangles of negative energies. Anne pulled out her pocket flask. Do you want a hit of seer tea? Hermosa Moruete took the flask and took a good swallow, and took her first steps into a larger world. She looked a bit queasy at first, but recovered nicely. There was a new ferocity in those gray eyes. You saved my life. Thank you. You are welcome, Anne said. What's the plan? I remember that there was supposedly an empty room nearby, with the Pilgrim's Path stone sculpture just sitting in the middle of the floor. Talking with visitors to the Harbinger Arch, I often recorded their journeys to level 710 in a notebook and cross referenced the data. For what seemed like hours, they walked these corridors, backtraced and retraced their steps, compared their surroundings with the testimony of those who walked this path. They found a rare hallway, devoid of clutter, and hoped that it would lead to that equally empty room. It ended in a tidy dead end. They turned around and found the man in black. They were trapped. And yet, the psychic saw something that filled her heart with hope. I ask that white light fill and surround us, cleansing our minds, bodies, and spirits. Protect us from all negativity, lower vibrational energy, or entities. I ask this, according to divine will, for the highest and greatest good, and so it is. And called forth the divine light of protection. Holy light filled her conscious thought and blinded her mind's eye with psychic energy. She could feel the darkness trying to penetrate the light and make her vulnerable again. Amy, she called, take the hairbrush from your backpack and put the pack back on. Anne locked her gaze on the man in black. Amused, the MIB waited patiently for his kill. He looked pleased. I am holding the hairbrush, Amy declared. Study the brush, memorize it. Fill your mind with only that brush, and do not look at anything or anyone else. Follow my instructions. Anne reached out her right hand and increased the psychic barrier. She refused to allow her secret to be known. Dark shadows began to appear on her white wall of mental concentration. The MIB was more powerful than any human. If this being knew her next move, it could be their undoing. Remember when I told you that the hairbrush was part of a magical pair? The MIB's focus moved to the hairbrush, and those dark spots on her mental barricade vanished. Her distraction worked. Anne could feel that confused, dark mind searching for answers. She took Amy's hand with her left and tightened her grip. Amy responded in kind. The image of the ring drawing itself on the wall next to them created a new step in the pilgrim's path. Someone or something was definitely on their side, helping them. Anne's right hand pressed hard against the pictograph that she kept hidden from her conscious thoughts by pure psychic willpower and misdirection. She never let go, even when the no-clip ended, and tossed them both roughly on the grass. The silvery ring floated in the sky overhead. The Harbinger Arc stood before them. This was level 710. He followed us here, Anne announced. You can feel his presence? Amy asked. No, I see him. He is standing behind you. To be continued. Link to the follow-up tale. Anne's farewell. 3 of 3. The Backrooms. Goodbye. I remember my first fist fight. The other girl was bigger, stronger, and meaner. I was a new kid. She sucker punched me and I went to the ground, seeing stars. dazed and crying. The bully stood there and taunted me. This fight had only just begun, but I already saw the end of the battle in my mind. The other girl would run for home, holding her bloody nose. The universe picked me up and dusted me off. I clenched my fists, and I proved my worth. AnneDunne, Meg Team Looking Glass. The man in black stood triumphant and mocked the failed attempt to escape. He was clothed in the flesh of a human and wore eyes that did not see and a mouth that could not speak. That was camouflage for the locals. His vision required no visible light. Human beings, none the wiser, connected his moving lips with that telepathic voice, convincing themselves that they were hearing a sound. "This ends here," he added. "You end here." AmyCochrane Crab walked out of immediate harm's way, jumped to her feet, and whirled twin swords in a single, smooth motion, like a ballerina with blades. AnneDunne assumed a locust position in the grass, and saw the end of the conflict in her mind. "We won't win this fight that way," she cautioned. "Please stand down, Hermoso Moruete." "You will not win any fight," the MIB corrected. "You are wrong," the psychic told her assassin. "I have seen your fate. It isn't so you can hide your thoughts from me," the man in black interrupted. "Little consolation when you lie dead and think no more thoughts." "We are not the only ones you have to fight," Anne said, and then she was gone. The MIB looked up and snarled at the ring in the sky. "About that escape, you better hurry," Amy said, keeping up her guard. "My friend in the ring might send Anne somewhere safe." He flashed his yellow eyes at the girl, growled when the enchantment had no effect, and no-clipped into the ring. Having studied the Meg archives regarding the Harbinger Arch and the ring found on level 710, AnneDunne knew exactly where she was. The infamous guest book rested on the writing table, under the north window of the ring. "Amy?" she called. "Amy!" Other than the writing desk and window, a gently curving, empty hallway extended in both directions. She told the one in the ring, "You protect her, please." "How wonderful, human," a voice seemed to whisper in her ear. Unlike sound, telepathy offered no clues to direction and distance. "Spending your last moments filled with concern over your fellow vermin." The MIB strolled into view. There was no use running. The one in the ring let the assassin get close to Anne before horizontal bars materialized and turned the hallway into a silver cage. "Woe is me," the man in black gasped in a frightened voice. Then he grinned and stepped right through the bars like smoke. He looked directly at the wall opposite of the north window and said, "These materials have no effect on me. You know that. What are you up to?" There was no answer. The assassin snapped off a 6-foot section of the bars like it was a dead twig. "Hollow and brittle," he declared. "Someone is getting feeble." Anne felt the MIB search the wall with his mind. "Can you imagine the weakling here, an immortal like myself, endures this appearance as an act of penance, squandering his existence by playing with humans in this pitiful place?" he asked Anne. "You, immortal?" she asked. "We cannot die," came the answer, "but we can be killed. Each incarnation is a link in our chain of eternal life, with both a beginning and an ending. It is now time for you to meet the one in the ring before I end its misery." With superhuman strength, the MIB plunged the silver pipe through the wall of the hallway. The ring trembled, and waves of psychic energy rippled reality like heat mirages on hot pavement. He broke loose another silver rod and used it like a cutlass to tear several long gashes into the thin wall. His hands freed the mutilated panel and tossed it down the hallway. Anne saw no wondrous technology. Was the ring the entity, the benefactor? What she did see was a silver tube, roughly 2 feet in diameter, just floating there, at her shoulder height, with no apparatus to support it. did this conduit run the entire quarter-mile circumference of the ring. The silver bar that spread through the wall had passed cleanly through the duct. The MIB next made 2 vertical cuts in the tube, joined by one long horizontal laceration. His quote-unquote cutlass splintered and shattered from the strain. He dropped it and ripped the pipeline wide open with one great effort. "Behold," the man in black announced, like some barker in a carnival sideshow, "I present to you your benefactor, the true friend of humanity, the great white worm, the mighty maggot." It was true. The one in the ring was, indeed, a gigantic maggot. Another truth became clear. The one in the ring found itself pinned into place by the silver bar, trapped and helpless. It could neither advance nor retreat. "Killing this would be a lot easier if I could find its tiny core," the assassin admitted. He snapped a third bar loose and stabbed the creature over and over, sending it into wriggling convulsions. Very difficult. "Stop!" Anne screamed. Her right hand fumbled in her pocket and lashed out before any thought of doing so became conscious. The flat sculpture of thick, black metal that she held between her middle and ring fingers opened a deep, diagonal canyon across the MIB. She called this weapon the Unicorn because the points looked like unicorn ears and a horn when it was clenched in her fist. The man in black did not bleed because he had no blood, no internal organs. His eyes rolled about like marbles in a bucket, and his lips no longer synchronized with that telepathic voice. He now resembled a badly dubbed foreign film. "What have you done?" he sputtered, those lips lagging behind. "Cold iron," Anne explained, "the historical weapon of choice against supernatural and interdimensional beings, according to legend and lore." Anne surrendered to an all-powerful wave of unconditional love from the worm. She closed her eyes and opened them to discover her right arm buried deep inside the benefactor, while purple fluid spurted from its wound. When she jerked her arm free, it was stained from fingertips to elbow. The weapon was lost somewhere inside the maggot. "I'm sorry," she apologized in tears. "I don't know what happened." "You hit the core!" the man in black exclaimed. "He is dying, but you will die first." Dozens of barbed spears of cold iron, like exaggerated porcupine quills, shot down from the ceiling and up from the floor in an explosion of overkill, impaling every part of the MIB. The worm had somehow replicated the iron from the sample embedded within it and created the ending that was meant to be. This sacrifice was the one's destiny all along. The benefactor no-clipped Anne to the ground below, while the assassin began a cacophony of telepathic screams. She hit the darkness running, blindly zigzagging between panic-stricken pilgrims and frantic Meg personnel. There was no fighting this compulsion. She was guided by forces beyond her control. Then sunlight poured from the Harbinger Arc, and she could see her house from here. The duration of evening twilight, or the interval between sunlight and night, in the front rooms was determined by the rotation of the Earth, the latitude, and the season of the year. It usually took a good hour or two for it to become dark. Level 710 was a different place. Day turned into night here in a matter of moments. AmyCochrane welcomed this darkness. From the moment the night had arrived, the last thing her enemies would ever see was the glint of her blades. She also welcomed the approaching Marvin Matthews, chief of the Meg Station Harbinger, and some darkness disappeared. To preserve his night vision, Matthews carried his oil lamp at waist height, lighting little more than his path. "There you are," Matthews said. "Heard you were back. Very sorry to hear about Sanchez. Alberto was one of our best." This was as far as the conversation had got before the great catastrophe of level 710 commenced, before the screaming started. The current population of the level, 20 or so pilgrims, and a half-dozen Meg personnel, poured out of their respective tents and shanties. Many held their hands over their ears in a futile attempt to muffle the inhuman, piercing shrieks echoing in their minds. AmyCochrane, quote-unquote, heard these telepathic screams earlier today on level 19. This time, there was no mocking laughter. "The man in black is in the ring," she told Matthews. "He's up there with AnneDunne." Natural sunlight beamed from the Harbinger arch. It was a beautiful morning in the front rooms. The shaft of daylight emanating from the portal illuminated a narrow path across the circle of barren ground. AnneDunne led the charge home as the scene began to flicker and fade. Not one person in this crowd seemed quick enough to make it in time. It all happened so fast. A freak gust of wind lifted the psychic off her feet and carried her safely through the portal. Fire engulfed the arch and standing stones, and the rocks burned like logs soaked in gasoline. Even lacking combustibles, the circle of bare earth erupted into a bonfire and drove the spectators back. The level heaved when the blaze collapsed into a deep sinkhole, and geysers of water extinguished the flames. The elements of air, fire, earth, and water had spoken. That left the screaming and the ring. No one present that night would ever forget the sight of the fiery ring in the sky, burning itself into nothingness. The silence was deafening. Image caption: Dr. John Rhinehart, Ph.D., Mega Archives. Many day-night cycles later, AmyCochrane greeted the dawn in her pink Hello Kitty nightgown and moccasins. She always found it amazing how the sky changed from day to night and back again without the benefit of a sun. What she missed most were the stars. No, what she missed most was the ring. The sky looked so empty. Mornings marked her ritual stroll to the outhouse. Level 710 was primitive, and that meant no electricity or running water. On the positive side, the level boasted a constant temperature of 70 something degrees, low humidity, and a soft breeze in the air. Even without the ring and Harbinger Arch, the level's spiritual interpretation persisted. Believers made the long journey to the recently formed Harbinger Lake and spent some quiet time at the small shrine that served as the terminus of the still operational Pilgrim's Path. Wanderers were prevented from drowning in this circular lake's deep waters by a crude fence and regular security. The natural reservoir was one of the greatest supplies of pure spring water found in the backrooms, with measurements confirming that its average depth was more than 200 feet. Wanderers could fill their canteens at a safe distance from the edge of the water thanks to a cistern hand pump, and courteous sentries watched out for anyone abusing the privilege. Amy took her sweet time returning to the one-room cabin that she now called home. Today was her day off. She smiled as her fellow security technicians from Team Harbinger exchanged pleasantries when the night shift greeted their daylight counterparts. The Meg presence had dramatically increased here lately for no apparent reason. There was loose talk about creating a settlement and establishing a community. She spotted the couple waiting on her porch and picked up the pace, instantly recognizing the gray-haired scientist, but not the young woman. The stranger had remarkable hair that flowed in strands of black, dark gray, and sparkling silver. She appeared to be in her early 20s and not much taller than 5 feet. From her fingertips to her elbow, the right arm was covered in a deep purple stain. It was those eyes. Each orb sported a frosted iris on a globe of ice. She wore a crimson cloak that obscured her physique. Something about this newcomer almost scared Amy to death. Not much frightened AmyCochrane. "You are up early, Dr. Rhinehart," Amy observed, then asked, "Who is your amazing companion?" Image caption: Anonymous painting of AnneDunne, transformed, Meg Archives. "Hermosa Moruete, that's a very cute look for you," the stranger said in a very familiar voice. "Anne, what happened?" The psychic gave her a heartfelt hug and calmly suggested that they continue their conversation inside the cabin. Dr. Rhinehart shut his eyes and faced the wall, while Amy quickly changed into black jeans and blouse. Matching swords completed the ensemble. You can look now, Amy said. I will boil some water for tea. Not seer tea, the scientist pleaded. Herbal tea, Amy laughed. With sweetener produced by entities on this level. Rhinehart made a face. I saw the front rooms through the Harbinger Arch that night, Amy began, just before the wind swept you through the portal. Anne explained. I had the option of hiding within my previous life or accepting my fate. The Backrooms is a liminal space, a threshold or border, a transitional stage. When certain people no clip here from the front rooms, it is not by accident. There are higher powers at work. Higher powers? Rhinehart asked. Amy poured 3 cups of herbal tea. Some good, Anne answered, some not. The host added a pink fragment of sweetener to each cup. It dissolved instantly and completely. Rhinehart chanced a taste, then another, and then another. The flora shall break through space and time to bring one and all to this peaceful place, Anne said. Pardon me? Anne questioned. I walked between worlds until I followed the shimmering vines. These vines led me to Hortus Aeternius, a botanical paradise and home to 300 Ivlania. Level 414 endured in silence for a very long time, hidden from the rest of the backrooms. But now, by decree of the high bloom of the banquet, these flowery folk welcome wanderers. From there, the pilgrim's path led me here. And back to me, Amy chirped. Remember, you said that we will become good friends. You must become great friends, Rhinehart added. You are the third musketeer. Amy shot him a quizzical look. We are creating an independent counseling agency and would be honored if you would join us. I want you to call us Psychic Science and Swords, but Anne has her heart set on calling us Epiphany. 2 votes to 1, Amy announced. Epiphany it is. Anne suppressed a laugh and said, This will work out just fine. The scientist interrupted the party. We have our first task. There's another anomaly on level 710. It has the appearance of a transparent sphere filled with pinkish clouds that is raised atop a great stone pedestal. It is nestled out of sight in a deep valley surrounded by hills, not more than 1 day's journey from here. The Major Explorer Group has authorized me to use any and all measures at my disposal. Epiphany now represents those aforementioned measures. Amy asked everyone to join hands. All for one and one for all, she said. And so it begins.